Welcome. My name is Debbie Franco, and I am personally really looking forward to spending time in the quiet, and that's in a lot of different places. But I'm finding that it's more challenging to find quiet these days than it used to be. Um, I hope you all are here joining us for the Beyond Silos: Building a Shared Natural Resource Vision for California's Next Governor workshop. So first, I'm going to start by introducing Watershed Solutions Network because we are really excited by what a nice flow of new folks we keep getting in our workshops, and so we're glad to have you. And a little bit about WSN. So we are driven to cultivate communities, equitably stewarding thriving watersheds. We intentionally are taking a watershed approach, which for us is everything. People hear watershed and often think water. But for us, it's all the intricate, complex pieces and parts that make up a watershed. And we are headwaters to groundwater to outflow. That's a nod to Kamiar, who keeps reminding us that groundwater is part of the system and it's also part of our natural infrastructure. Um, and so we originally started as an intensive cohort experience, and our goal was to teach our cohort members how to be better collaborators, how to center equity, and how to apply systems thinking. So we intentionally started cross-sector and cross-jurisdictional. We're intentionally tackling the challenge of aligning human and natural systems at watershed scale. And ultimately, our drive is to connect people, places, and policy. And that's where we think we get the best and most, we get the change that is most consistent with the pace of how everything around us is changing. So this is one of our workshops that we hold every fourth Thursday. You will note today is a Wednesday. We had a scheduling conflict tomorrow. But most often we're here every fourth Thursday of the month. We cover many different topics in our workshops, as many of you know who've been participating regularly, all with an eye toward promoting cross-sector thinking, cross-pollination, and building understanding across sectors and perspectives. And our next workshop, I'll give you a quick sneak peek, is going to be on the multi-purpose multi-purpose. No, I have the words wrong on the screen. The MLRP, everyone knows it as the MLRP, but basically it's the program that was set up to help make land transitions where they're necessary in order to balance groundwater basins. And we have a bunch of our WSN members who went through our cohort experience, who've been working in the program, who are going to come together and talk about their experience and what's going right and where we might apply some of our WSN learning to make things go even better. In all of our workshops, we invite you to honor our values. Again, for those of you who've been here before, I hope these are familiar and that you're getting great practice using them. We value contextual confidentiality. Basically, what we mean by that is we hope that you will take what you're learning here and not quote others, but take the learning and share the learning. And we ask this because oftentimes when you hear someone else's story and you repeat it, you change it in a way that's not actually authentic to the original story. So we want people to be able to share their own stories, and then for everyone to be able to take the learning and to take that forward with you. We also ask that folks be curious listeners. We don't structure this as a spot for active debate or disagreement. We structure this space to support learning and understanding. And the way that you get there is by being curious about what other people think and what they're trying to communicate to you. So asking questions and really challenging yourself when you feel a sense of discomfort. And a little later, I'll walk through what we invite folks to do when you start feeling your shoulders come up and you're feeling a little uncomfortable because someone's saying something that challenges you in some way. We also ask you all to be part of our environment of inclusive participation. So we ask everyone to be conscious of how people are participating. If you're taking up a lot of space, try to take up less. And if you're not taking up any space, please challenge yourself to add to the conversation. We really, truly believe that every voice is important and everyone brings something important to the conversation. And then we believe we will get farther faster together. It's what keeps us going and keeps us coming together to do this work. And we think a systems approach can leverage synergies that you can't find if you're not looking across boundaries. And like I said, we 100% believe that everyone has something important to contribute. And so please be looking for that in all of the folks that are speaking and all of the folks that you engage with in the breakouts later. So, the invitation to you today is to really explore and lean into the opportunity that transition offers. At each gubernatorial transition, you have a set of leaders and a set and ways of thinking that will be exiting and new ways that are coming in. And that transition is an opportunity for us to imagine natural resources on new terms and to imagine how we might leapfrog or shift gears or improve or embrace things we may not have been embracing or understand things we may not have been understanding under the existing regime, which is not a criticism of the regime. It's just the opportunity that comes with transition. So the invitation is to unleash our collective imaginations together. And we are super lucky to have, I think my slides are out of order. We are super lucky to have two folks who are joining us here today to help us work through this conversation and give us some information and some ideas to start with. So our second speaker, I'm going to introduce her first, Dore Bietz. She is one of the most fun people that I know. I don't think I have ever hung out with Dore and not had a phenomenal time. Just she brings the party. So if you get the chance, hang out with Dore. She brings to this conversation a long career of working at the tribal and local government scale, and in particular in roles where she has interfaced with gubernatorial administrations. And so Dore is going to share with us her experiences and what she's learned and what she's hoping to see in the next administration that will make doing that interface more productive and constructive. Our first speaker, who I'm going to invite to join me in the spotlight, is Ken Alex. And Ken, I met as Ken was becoming part of the Brown administration. And I was really lucky because Ken hired me, and a lot of my cross-sector systems thinking really blossomed under Ken's leadership and under Ken's management style, where he kind of picked us all and said, go do good work. If you ever have the opportunity to work for someone who gives you that kind of latitude, do it. It was an experience that I think I'll be proud of for the rest of my days. So Ken, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have, what your reflections are on your experience as part of the Brown administration transition team and what your advice is for us in the next administration.
Well, thanks, Debbie. And I will say that the management style where you let really talented people go off and do things really accrues to the benefit of the manager as well. So thanks to you and everybody who worked at OPR. It was a real joy for me as well. Um, Thanks for having me. I want to start with the idea of humility. Transitions are hard. They're really hard for people in the government. They're difficult for people outside of it, trying to figure out what's going on and who to talk to. And so there are a lot of folks on this webinar and this Zoom that have a huge amount of experience in water issues, who know a heck of a lot more about those issues than I do, and in all likelihood, most of the members of the transition team. You will likely uh, be right in thinking that you know more than what some of the incoming folks know. But there's a lot that you don't know about the various issues of politics and demands and requirements and budgets and things that go into a transition. So I would try to find a nice balance between presenting your expertise and your suggestions for policy and recognizing the difficulties faced by everybody involved. And I'll tell you from inside the government, um, transitions are tough because you're trying to figure out where you stand as an employee and what you can do. Debbie noted that sometimes it allows you to do more because not everybody's paying attention as closely as they might later. But there's a lot of uncertainty, so it creates uh, a fair amount of concern and caution as well. So, and of course, water, as we all know, is incredibly complex. It creates lots of controversy. And I think it's fair to acknowledge that and to identify if you're in the position to give some advice to the transition folks or the people who are being appointed, that it's fair to really identify those conflicts and acknowledge some of the difficulties. So from my perspective, uh, when I was on the transition team, as Debbie noted, when the Brown administration came into office, and it was a pretty small transition team. We received transition notebooks, hundreds of pages from the Schwarzenegger administration, from folks leaving, and I have to say I found them hugely unhelpful. They were really kind of things broadly about the agencies or about departments, really not things that I found to be useful. And given that I was pretty inexperienced in thinking about how to run a government agency like OPR or be a governor's advisor, I found it very frustrating. So, and it was a moment at which I took the time to read carefully what was given because I thought it could be helpful. So I do think that this is a moment when you can get a good audience and get people to think about some things because there's a recognition of people coming in that they don't know everything and that there are plenty of things to learn. So a few thoughts occur to me. The first is there will be some issues that you've identified that need pretty immediate attention. And I'll just make something up just as an example. Perhaps there are some watersheds that are in the middle of the Sigma process that need some decisions. If you are aware of that and can point out some things that need some immediate attention, I think that would be quite valuable. Um, uh, Obviously, you want to focus, well, maybe it's not obvious. I would be fairly specific. I would be interested in the usual what, when, who, and the mechanics of what the decision might entail and who might be involved, maybe which agencies should be involved. I'd be particularly interested in the consequences of decisions or the consequences of failure to make decisions. And then I would make recommendations, but I would be humble with the recommendations, recognizing that there may be some issues and considerations outside of your knowledge. But having said that, because you have expertise, I think those recommendations should be made as clearly as possible. The other, so that's number one, is things that are fairly immediate. Number two, I would be very interested in things around good government and process. Um, Debbie talked about breaking down silos. This is a hugely problematic issue, and I know from our experience at OPR and some of the work that Debbie did that water silos are among the worst. So if you have thoughts and suggestions about how to um, limit or reduce some of that or other processes and issues that government faces where you think it can be done better and that there may be some straightforward fixes. I think those are well worth discussing and pointing out. Um, I can give you an example of something that I've failed to get done in the Brown administration over 8 years that I'm still after, which is that agency budgets are done on a very agency by agency, department by department basis. And they do not build into those budgets the time and staffing it takes to work with other agencies. And so I've been trying for years to try to get the Department of Finance to change that. And I think I just present that as an example of, in a time of transition, maybe getting a little different thought process. And I'm going to make that recommendation myself to the transition team. I think there will be a fair amount of interest in how to better coordinate because there is recognition that coordination is difficult. There's a lot of interest in where the bottlenecks occur and where there are budget anomalies. Remember that one of the first things the governor has to do when he comes into office is the January version of the budget. It's a little bit insane that it's so immediate for a new governor. But to the extent that there are budget issues that, and we know that there are, that are connected to all the water issues, I think that's a place where you'll get some good response or at least good evaluation and reading. And then I don't want to talk too long, so the next, maybe one of the last things I want to say here is in terms of policy and vision, in some ways this is the hardest place to make recommendations because the governor will want to develop and have his staff develop their own policy ideas. Having said that, water is a place where there's recognition of the difficulty. As I noted, I would recognize some of that challenge and difficulty. I would identify issues that you think are important. I would be very open about what opposition there might be to a solution that you're proposing. And I would be very explicit, if you can be, about what mechanisms you see as a way to get to the solution that you're proposing. How do you overcome the opposition, the challenges, the barriers, the silos, et cetera? Are different agencies holders of different views? For example, sometimes, as you know, the Water Board doesn't agree with the Department of Water Resources or the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Is there a need for legislation? Are there rule changes that could be made by the executive branch? Things like that. And quickly, a couple of other points, and then I'll wrap up. I think there's a recognition that despite a lot of progress that's been made around water data, there's still not enough transparency and not enough sharing of data among all levels of government and all agencies. And so if you have more suggestions for how to improve the data situation, I think those could be valuable. And then the final thing I want to mention is suggestions for appointments. Um, I was fairly disappointed with the suggestions made by a lot of the environmental groups for appointing officials to the government. Hopefully that changes a bit now, but they were what I would call the usual suspects. That's not necessarily bad, but it's not that helpful. And so I would spend some time thinking about maybe some off the beaten track candidates. And as one example, it's actually quite a challenge to fill the regional water board positions because they're constrained. Some of the positions are constrained by requirements in the statute, and they're also geographically diverse. So if you have time and interest and willingness to come up with good candidates for appointments like that that do make a pretty big difference, I think it's worth spending some time and thought doing that. So, Debbie, I think I'll stop there. If you have any questions, we can do it now or later.
Yeah, I think actually, gosh, I have actually a bunch of questions, but one I would highlight right now. Can you say a little bit about the importance of the governor's team? So, like, my recollection of the Brown administration, I feel like one of the most important people was Nancy McFadden, and she did a job that over the course of many governors, I have never seen anyone do as well. So could you say a little bit like, and how, I mean, it seems like that person has to be a trusted, like maybe we don't influence that, but I also know that as the transition team, you all are looking to fill out the team, the governor's team, right? The secretaries,
Yeah.
all the like what do you have any advice any further thoughts on the importance of that team and um
Yeah, well, Jerry Brown is, as usual, a little idiosyncratic. The Brown transition team was about 10 or 12 people, literally. Schwarzenegger had 150, and Newsom was somewhere in the middle, but closer to 100. So, trying to figure out who on the transition team has some influence on environmental appointments and on water appointments, and issues concerning those agencies, I think is quite important and valuable. And there will be folks in this group who will have pretty good insight into that and may have already. I know a couple of people who may have some input into it already. Um, and at least in the Brown transition, we didn't really get any direction from Governor Brown, but Cliff Rexhoffen and I decided we would look at all the environmental appointments and see if we could find candidates that we could bring to the governor and to his appointment folks. And that's how we proceeded. Whether other transition teams will do the same, I don't know. Nancy McFadden was, and I agree with Debbie, she was sui generis, as we say in the law, unto herself. Um, she came in a little bit later into the process. She was not part of the transition team. Um, uh, so, in terms of getting to some of the key appointments, including things like cabinet secretary and secretaries of various agencies. The transition team did have a fair amount of influence, and I think with Becerra, who doesn't have a long-standing team in place for this, that the transition team will have a fair amount of influence. So I would try to figure out who to connect with.
well, thank you, Ken. I'm going to invite Dory to join me here in the spotlight. Um, and And Dory, I'm really interested to hear both your any reflections you have on Ken's vantage point, and then also like what does the world look like from boots on the ground?
Oh, well, thanks, Debbie, for the invite and the opportunity. I agree in a lot of the statements or the suggestions or recommendations from Ken. I think, part of the conversation, you touched on it earlier, the importance of relationships. And in the world, from the boots on the ground side of it, most recently working in local government, but also even from a tribal perspective, is really developing those relationships. And I think, um, you know, we have seen, while there may be changes in administration and key individuals, and those are important, but what stays a lot in some of the state agencies are those staff. And the staffs are the drivers. And, the staffs are driving between the administration. They're continuing to do the operational, policies. They're helping ensure that things are continuing to get done and run efficiently. And I think that's part of it as well, is continually having those relationships at all levels, right, of the government is really, really important. And I think this is a challenge because we often get, it's not just the siloed, but we get focused on those particular agencies and what they can do as opposed to what they can collectively or what they might overlap in those relationships and what they can join in an effort side of it. And I think sometimes the boots on the ground side of it is looking at, this different perspective, this view from below, maybe. If you really were, put it pen on paper, but it's also that how enormous it can be, but how there's so many different common goals, and it's really trying to identify what those common goals are and building those relationships and connecting those relationships so that the work we're doing at the lowest level is continuing on up into the highest level. And I think, as we look to it, I mean, administrations change. We've been through, that ebb and flow and the tide of the administration and the effects of different administrations. But it's really important also to stay connected with the folks that have been there continuously and pulling in their expertise to continue some of that groundwork, because those are the individuals that also will be there after these administrations change. And so this is just a few things that I would make suggestions from. And relationship building isn't just about a name and a number. In my world, from emergency management, you never want to call people, right when you need them. You want to develop the relations beforehand. And having that space to do that takes effort. And I used to, speak to a lot of agencies about building relationships with tribal, and it's no different than any local government or any, state or federal agency, is you have to get to know them. You have to understand, what is the goal of that particular, but also too, what are the benefits and what are the resources and how can you interconnect and support those shared common goals that you might have. And so mine's short and quick, Deb, so I don't know if you have any other, pointed questions, but it's really, about continuing those relationships, but spending time in those relationships so that you continuously have that voice, but also that understanding, of those commonalities that exist.
So, Dory, is there anything, as you've interacted across administrations, I love your point about frontline staff. That was actually something I had to learn when I joined the Brown administration, because mostly I'd been at odds with frontline staff, and it was like, oh wait, now I get it. I mean, they're there because they're committed to doing the thing they do, and can be great allies. But anything that in your experience from the ground up, any kinds of like governance elements or anything that you feel like might make it easier to either maintain those relationships or cross boundaries or just make things work better?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen in this current administration as well as previous administrations the movement toward that, and I'll take that just from a tribal perspective. You've seen more inclusion and also opportunity to make sure that tribal perspectives are seen, but it's not just tribal perspectives, right? If we're talking about equity inclusion for all human beings, we have to really dig deep. And Water Solutions Network taught me a lot about that and about the importance of water, and even for our most vulnerable communities. But digging deeper and really truly understanding how do we reach those areas and change policy that is assisting and helping everyone. Sometimes we're focused on responding and being reactive as opposed to being preventative and looking. Hey, we were going to have a problem with water. We all know that, right? Everybody on this call will raise their hand and say, yes, we agree. Climate is changing. Mother Nature is pissed and is going to do something about it, whether we do it or not. And we're going to have to be reactive. But knowing that, then what can we do? How can we change those policies? It is at all levels. It is not just at the top. It has to be at every level. We're being impacted from the federal level. The state is going to be impacted in more ways than we would like from what's happening at the federal and the administration at the federal side. But then what happens in the state side, and then also regional as well as locally? And how do we really build such a great force to be preventative, to mitigate those things, because we know they're coming. So.
Well, all right, maybe I'll invite Ken back also to the spotlight. And folks, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I have a couple for both of you. So if you could wave a magic wand, what's the one thing that you think, like, what the most important thing that the next administration should do? And I just want to expand your thinking. It doesn't have to be like a specific policy. It could be how the next administration governs, brings, I don't know. Anyway, I have lots of ideas, but I'll leave it to you too. Like, if you just took a moment to think about like, if they do nothing else, what's the one thing?
I'll give you I mean, there are many sort of substantive things that I would like to see them do, but I'll give you a process one, which is I think that there needs to be an empowerment of cross-agency action. So there is something that I think actually started in Schwarzenegger that Brown used, and I think Newsom has to a somewhat less extent, focused on energy, called the energy principles, where the heads of various energy agencies and departments meet with the governor's office regularly to figure out how they can work together to solve some of the intractable issues, for example, like transmission lines. I'd like to see that for water. And I think they could probably pick a couple of other issues. And then along similar lines, I'd like to see somebody designated in the governor's office on particular high issues of high importance, like transmission and like water, to start working on not just the solution, but how do you implement the solution?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Ken on the water issue. Obviously, I think it's going to be more of a sooner issue than we all want to deal with, right? I mean, it's consistent. It's something that we see coming, and it's really definitely going to be something that's going to impact all of our communities, everybody up and down the state. But for so many reasons, right? It's not just access to water and getting water, but what are we doing with the fact that water supply is being depleted. But I also think the other side of it, and I would be remorse if I didn't also put, the wildfire resiliency side of things that we have to continue, because that is not going to go away. It is very connected, to the bigger climate change that is happening and what that impacts to, all of us. But continuing the prioritizing of changing the way we build, the changing the way we live, which is also water, right? When you talk about water conservation, but it's also, how are we living in our built environment that's going to reduce that risk for these potential wildfires? We have to continue to do that. There's a lot of land that will continue to burn. Vegetation grows, unfortunately, and then it burns again, and then it grows, and then it burns. And so it's that cycle. Same thing with water and drought. We see those cycles, and we know those cycles are coming. And some years are better, and some are not. And we just have to be better at figuring out, putting more emphasis into those mitigation and coming up with those solutions and figuring out systems to address those solutions on a large scale, a statewide scale.
So I'll also remind everyone that water and forests are connected. So I'm hoping you all will take this and also really lean into the intersections of things and the systems. And Ken, I feel like I should remind you that we did have water principles in the Brown administration. And I think that illustrates the importance of leadership, and both inside the administration and outside the administration alignment. Because why I think energy principles were so much more powerful was because of the gravitas at the table inside the administration, and the fact that you had a constituency outside the administration that was aligning with what was going on inside the administration. So I just want to say there's also work that needs to be done, both to make sure you've got the right leaders at the table, and also to make sure that outside of the administration, we're doing our work. So we have a question. Probably this is for you, Ken. Clayton is wondering, what's the typical process for putting forward prospective appointees to state commissions like regional water boards?
Yeah, so you can, particularly if you do it as an organization, it's a little easier than an individual, but either way, you can send it to the transition team. There will be a transition team named, and there probably will be a head of the transition team. In all likelihood, there won't be an appointment secretary initially, but if there is, that's the other place to send it as well. And I will expect that they'll provide email addresses.
And Paul Helliker shared the link where you can actually use a web form to nominate someone, or to nominate yourself. I will say, in my experience in both administrations, it is very rare that someone gets appointed through those forms. It's almost always, if you want to get appointed to something, be in touch with the organizations that are likely influential on the issue area that you want to be appointed in. It's almost always, people's names filter up, or they show up in somebody's office and they're just so phenomenal. So, but it's not a bad way to start, and especially if it's a lesser appointment. That sounds horrible, but if it's not something everyone's after, you might fill out that form and get a call, because they're just, they're looking for people. Any other questions? That's the only question area we have so far. Or anything else, Ken or Dory, that's occurred to you that you want to reflect on? Dory, maybe you could say a word or two about your recent, was it an appointment to the role you're playing with CAL FIRE? Like,
Yeah.
how does that process work?
Yeah, I'll just, it's pretty exciting that I think for many years CAL FIRE has, obviously, any of the state agencies have worked hard to, include tribes in both from an advisory capacity, but also creating tribal liaison positions, paid staff positions within their departments, which is, I go back to, oh my goodness, the first Caltrans Native American Advisory Committee and the tribal leaders who sat on that. But I was recently, CAL FIRE has 6 incident management teams. And so when there's a wildfire on SRA or state responsibility land, CAL FIRE will go and manage those incidents depending on the level of that particular event. If the local fire cannot handle it, or the local agencies cannot. And so CAL FIRE has these incident management teams. In the world of incident management, it obviously follows incident command system under FEMA, and really lays out, a team that goes and manages both from an operational standpoint, logistics, finance, planning, but also the incident commander. There's a public information officer, and then there's a liaison officer team. And so this last year, CAL FIRE created on each of their teams a tribal liaison specific person who would be a part of the liaison officer team. And that particular person would then assist the incident manager when there is a fire that would impact cultural resources, tribal lands, tribal resources, tribal communities, etc. No different than a liaison officer would for any special district or agency, federal, state, when there's a fire impacting, and be the conduit of information back and forth. And it was really important that CAL FIRE created these positions. And so they have 6 teams, and one on each of the teams. And I am a proud member of one of those 6. So I am very excited and honored to have been chosen. So I'm on team 6. Actually, there was a chance that I wouldn't be here today because of it. My team is actually up this week. So if there is a call, I will then go with that team and support, and be the conduit for the tribal side of things. So really excited they've taken that position, and really thankful that the director of CAL FIRE saw the importance of that and creating that. Because it's not only during suppression, repair, but also prior to, and just including tribes and tribal cultural resources as a priority, not just to protect, but also just to have those relationships with. So that is something new that CAL FIRE has started, and we'll see how it goes. So excited about it.
So Dory, was that an application process or?
Yeah, it was an application. You have to be invited to be a part of the team. You have to meet certain qualifications. I obviously had some experience as a liaison officer on a federal side with some federal fires, and obviously my recent experience as a county Office of Emergency Services staff person also lends to understanding all the things that have to happen with local government, state agencies, and tribes during a disaster or a wildfire.
I love that. It's like crossing, from inside the agencies to outside the agencies, creating these teams. And that is a good segue. Norma Camacho is interested in your thoughts about empowering a watershed principles. And I'm going to add a couple of nuances to that. One, watershed, again, in our parlance is everything, not just water. And 2, I wonder how might that look if we imagined principles that spanned inside the administration and outside the administration, and would that be a pro or a con?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Hi, Norma. It is, when I talk about water principles, and I think from a personal perspective, understanding and valuing water, for us as Native communities and natives, water is life, but that is a principle that is for everyone, right? You cannot survive without water. Let's just all face it, right? We all need water, not just for our own physical being, but for everything we do in our communities and the life as we know it today, right, is so dependent on water. And I think, establishing water principles, I think is great. I think tying in back to a tribal indigenous perspective of traditional ecological knowledge of what water means, water, where water comes from, how we protect the watershed that provides for that water, is really important. And I think those are great ideas for water principles. Moving them into a systems place, right, and having entities adopt those water principles means we all have to agree, on not just the language, but what does it mean? Are we all going to conserve? And again, my education over the years of how naive the general public is about where their water comes from, how they can make steps to conserve that water or protect that water or the importance of water just blows my mind, really blows my mind. And so that's the hard part of developing these higher level, administration policies when the general public is just like, what are you talking about? They walk into the bathroom and they turn the tap on and they're, I got water. That's all I have to be worried about. And so bridging that gap, I think is another area that we have to work on, because we got to get ownership. I've worked, like I said, the last 5.5 years in a wildfire resilience kind of space where it is really getting individuals to understand they have an individual responsibility. So if we don't start with that individual responsibility, we can't get people to buy into the bigger principles from a regional or state perspective.
So, Dore, you took that in a totally different direction. No worries. I think the question was about whether establishing, so Ken was talking about having energy principles. And I think Norma's question was about print, and that's like and maybe this wasn't clear even when Ken was speaking, I understood what he was saying. So what happened in the Brown administration is there were groups of people that, like, the principal actors on an issue, in the very successful case on energy, and that group would be regularly convened. In that case, it was Cliff the one who convened that group, Ken, or did you do it together?
Cliff and I did it. Mary Nichols, the president of the PUC, the head of the ISO. So, and their function wasn't everything. It was, what are the big issues that the principals can agree on that need to be done? And then it got down to the level of sometimes doing Gantt charts about when things were going to get done. And so it can be replicated, but it's not about every issue. It's taking on things that the group at a high level wants to really say we need to get done.
And what do you think about that, the potential of that on the water side of things? And
so I have a couple of thoughts. One is that if you can identify the specific set of things across watersheds where the state has a keen interest and can get things done that are not watershed specific, then I think it could be quite a good idea. The other thing is, there is the Strategic Growth Council. The Strategic Growth Council, for those not aware, is made up of 9 or 10 agency secretaries plus a couple of public appointees. Well, they're appointed by the legislature. And in theory, that's supposed to be a cross-government set of action, but the way it's currently created, it has a very modest staff, and they have a budget just to do certain things. But if you reconstituted or rethought about the budget and made it into a decision-making body with broader authority, it actually has a fair amount of authority. It just doesn't have the budget to do anything. That could be a place to do a number of things, water-related, climate-related, wildfire. Well, I keep out of wildfire because there's a wildfire task force. But as you see, these things get complicated immediately. But it is a mechanism that exists that I think people thought could be broader in scope than what it's actually been.
And maybe that's another good tip is see if there's an existing body that you can reuse or redeploy or amplify.
Can I make,
Yeah.
since one other thing that occurs to me, an incoming governor will want some early wins if they are possible. And I think it would not surprise me if there is something focused on energy affordability, just as an example. So what I'm thinking on the water side is the Colorado River issue is enormously consequential. If there are ways for an early win there, or maybe the Salton Sea, those could be things that could get some traction if there are ways across a series of groups feeling like here's at least a solution or part of a solution that could move quickly.
The key is across a series of groups. That's why we're all here today, seeing where we have common ground. And also, I think there may be opportunities we're not seeing like on affordability. There's certainly affordability issues on the water side too. And if we keep the sectors separate, that challenge on the water
True.
side seems implausible. But is there a methodology where we align across basic resources that a household needs?
The one other thing,
Yeah, no, go ahead.
um, if if it's possible to have a conversation with what I would expect to be the outgoing secretary, particularly for the Resources Agency, whom Debbie and I know well, that might be quite a valuable thing to do because he knows a heck of a lot and believes in good government and um, might have some things that might not otherwise be obvious.
Yeah, that's a good tip for a future workshop. Maybe we'll see if we can invite Wade along. So we have more questions that have been populated. We are out of time. I'm gonna just read what we have here, and give you, Ken and Dory, 1 minute to answer whatever of this you'd like to, or to do a closing remark. One question from Jim is, how can we better ensure that the good ideas and teams that are working well and effective are retained while making room for innovation in the new administration? Tracy Sheehan. That's a name from the past. Hi, Tracy. Can you give us a better sense of how Becerra might prioritize water issues? Like what kind of platform? I will just say Cal Enviro voters did a debate. You might that actually Clee. There were a bunch of folks collaborated on that, so let me say that there were a few comments on water in that debate. But that's another question. And then Robin, who you, Ken, and Robin are on the same wavelength on data. Do outgoing administrations play any meaningful role in shaping the understanding and priorities of the incoming administration? There's a lot of focus currently on positioning issues in front of the new incoming parties, and I just wonder whether there are any opportunities we should be thinking about in terms of a desire within the current administration to set the next one up to build off past successes. Are there opportunities there? And then Shelby is curious about what would a win in the Colorado River watershed look like? Those are a lot of diverse questions. Any final thoughts? And then folks who are hanging out here, we're going to be shifting into the breakouts, which I really hope that you all will stick around for.
Um, so quickly on the outgoing impacting the incoming, assuming it's a Dem to Dem handoff here, I think there are quite a lot of potential. That's why, in part, I brought up Wade. But as Dory talked about, the continuing staff is sort of the through line that's incredibly important. And so how you maintain that is to be supportive of, as Dory talked about, of the staff and the work that they're doing. And sometimes it's good for incoming appointees to hear that as well. So to the
Yeah.
extent you can promote that. It's a good idea. And I have nothing to to contribute to the Colorado River issue.
Yeah, I'm with Ken on that. I mean, I'm hopeful, but I read everything about Colorado River, and I'm just like, oh my goodness gracious. And I think the only closing thoughts again is that understanding that this work is complex and that multi-level and that there's a lot of great opportunity. We just have to seize upon it. So and get to work on it. So.
Well, great. So that's what we're doing right now is getting to work on it. So this was such a great conversation. We went longer. Um, I am going to pull up my slides, but if you get motion sick, you might want to close your eyes because I'm going to zoom through a bunch of things and get to the instructions for the breakouts. While I am doing that, um, I let's see if I can let me just find the one. Um, while I'm doing this, let me also just give you all a heads up on what comes next. So WSN is taking the opportunity to catalyze this conversation from now through at least November. Where what we do at that point will depend how quickly or how slowly the new administration gets in and starts figuring themselves out. Um, we are doing this workshop. We have a training in the fall that you should keep an eye out for. And then we also are going to be convening principals across the natural resources sector who are going to chew on what comes out of this workshop. So again, please hang around if you can for the second hour and contribute to the discussion. So we are really, WSN is really inviting you to think about where the opportunities are in this transition. We think that we have a lot in common across the silos, and more importantly, that across all of our resources, all of our outcomes are deeply intertwined and virtually impossible for any single agency, sector, or strategy to secure them alone. What? Oh my word! I'm having a hard time with my PowerPoint today. Um, So on this slide, which is way too small, I just want to emphasize that a shared natural resource vision is not a plan. It's the direction beneath the plan, and basically the value of a vision is it helps you to distinguish when something is continuing to be helpful and you keep doing it, when something is no longer serving you and you let it go, or when you just have to manage something because it is what it is, you can't change it. Oh gosh, my mouse is going crazy. So keep that in mind when you go into the breakouts. We're inviting you to step outside the familiar. I know everyone wakes up every day, you go to your jobs because you're driven to do the thing. We're asking you to soften your focus on that. If you can look beyond your immediate urgent priorities just for the next hour and imagine what could be possible if we work together across sectors, boundaries, and other things that usually separate us. We're asking you to shift toward the possible. We spend a lot of time figuring out how to keep people from doing things we don't want them to do. We're asking you to show up in this breakout thinking about what's possible if we trust people and we are looking at what could be, and really focusing on the direction we all want to move together instead of what we do a lot of, which is kind of staying stuck together here. And then to embrace collective imagination. It's really easy to stick with what's familiar, with what you already know, and there's plenty of places and spaces to do that. We're asking you here and now to use your imaginations to really think through like where are those interconnections, where are those systems forces, where are the things that pull us together, and where we might be able to make progress faster. I'm going to skip this one. Hopefully you read the framing document about embracing your discomfort. If you feel uncomfortable, please pull that document up and take a look at our invitation to you to really explore your discomfort and not to face it out toward the group. Again, I'm going to skip over what we might gain. We have lots of systems, curriculum, and opportunities that we could dig into deeper. Um, so we are going to put you into breakout groups momentarily. I think we're still going to give you 40 minutes in your breakout groups. Your task is to introduce yourselves, ideally first as humans, though I know it's very challenging. And then we have some tasks like facilitator, presenter, note taker. Assign those out. Do that as quickly as you can. At the end, you could go back around and do your organizations and roles if your group wants to, and if you want to do that in lightning round fashion. In the second step, we'd like you to each person in the group take a minute, only a minute, to identify a shared challenge. This may be challenging, and if people, this is not the time for debate or discussion. People might nail this, or they might say something that's not, in the realm of a shared challenge. No worries. This is your opportunity just to put on the table what you want to put on the table. But please try to get to those shared challenges. And then the real work of the breakout is to identify governance commitments that you would like to ask of the next administration. And why we're focusing on governance commitments is because this is what Ken was talking about. This is like, who do you appoint and what do you expect of them? And water principles, that would be a governance, watershed principles, that would be a governance kind of commitment. But the who does it and the how we do it are so important, and we don't often spend a lot of time thinking about that. It's also often where we have the most in common. So think about governance commitments. Also importantly, name the tensions that your group comes across. We also have an imaginary world where we all agree on everything and we go off together and do beautiful things. In the real world, there are important tensions that we hold. Our tensions are created because we have different life experiences, different priorities. They come up for very good reasons. And so we want, and it's also what Ken was describing when he was saying, tell us who's going to be for it, who's going to be against it, and what do they care about, and why, describe that tension that exists. In particular, focus on tensions that you think are really important to continue to hold, because maybe we don't know how to make the trade-off yet, or tensions that will always need to be balanced because there are good things, on every side of that tension, or tensions you don't know what to do with, but they're going to trip us up if we don't pay attention to them. So ask yourself about what the tensions are that come up in your discussion, and then prepare a 2-minute report out, and we'll come back and we'll hear from all the breakout groups. I'm going to skip over this. I'm so sad, and actually my image is not showing, which is a bummer. I'll just say, there are many interesting connections if you start with our food system, between food and mental health and political fragmentation, that are invisible right now because of how we silo, how we think about what causes people to act in a certain way, how the food that we put in our bodies impacts what we do every day. This was going to be a really exciting for me, a really exciting dive into something where you can see for a moment where there are connections and system forces that we tend to render invisible. It was meant to inspire you to think outside the box. Maybe next time. Oh yeah, there's my image. I think I pulled up the wrong PowerPoint. At any rate, I am going to not go through all of these slides. I'm going to stop right here. And so just say a little bit more about a governing commitment. So again, it's broad enough to matter across sectors and regions. It's grounded in real world outcomes, not just in process. It's specific enough to change how government actually operates, and durable enough to remain useful even as conditions, programs, and politics shift. Those are really, like, when I think back in my time, in state government, the things that did those four things were the most powerful in creating opportunity and moving us forward in leapfrogging. I mean, again, Ken mentioned energy principles. I think energy principles reflect all four of those criteria. Welcome back. Thank you. I always am impressed and happy to see the amazing people who stick with it all the way to the end. And we're really thankful for all the thoughts you're going to share momentarily. But without further ado, group one, who is your presenter?
Yeah, well, by the next administration, I mean, I feel apologies for biasing the conversation in this direction, but it's got some concurrence that it would be really important for California to have stronger systems of accounting and sort of federated and more transparent systems for data sharing that underlie and support those systems of accounting. And we talked a lot about some of the tensions that there is often not enough attention to this issue from leadership or an understanding of the immensity of resourcing and sort of logistical maneuvering that needs to happen to really make this work because of all the sort of long calcified siloed approaches to data collection that exist today. So that's a tension that we named, and then also kind of the tensions around privacy, like where's the right line between openness and sharing and respecting privacy when appropriate. And then finally, a third tension around this sense of kind of burden and fatigue with monitoring and reporting that exists at the local scale, and how do we kind of get away from that and more towards a sense of like possibility and utility and use cases and things like that. So those were the tensions named. And then we also spoke to another idea. Well, we didn't get to like how to solve for that. Another idea that came up in our group of something important would be to rethink the water rights system, but we sort of barely scratched the surface on that concept. So I'll stop there since we're short on time.
All
And
right.
welcome others in my group to add if I missed anything.
All right. Thank you, group one. Group two, who is your presenter?
I think that's us. So I'll keep it short. We had some really good conversation, and one of the challenges that we also came to finding a governing commitment is in regards to the kind of collaborative and not working in silos situation or breaking silos, which we're seeking a commitment for the next administration to have a broader perspective. Also seek more experience from its leaders and next appointees, so as the whole administration can have a better and more comprehensive response and actions. That could be in the form of, even job descriptions, things like that, that could, really frame that for this next group of folks that would that would shift the directions of California in different perspectives, not just a single sector. Part of that, it's a sort of a recommendation for these appointees and new leaders to take the time to understand what has been done to date and build upon it, so they don't have to reinvent anything or kind of shift things for staff, just so everybody it stays productive and that there's not a sort of any conflicts of like, we tried that 10 years ago, they didn't work, but we'll do it anyway since you want to do it. It's just more of a recommendation, so everybody could build upon what has been built to date and not start from scratch again or reinvent the wheel per se. Yeah, and I'll stop there. I know there was a lot more that we discussed, but I'll let my colleagues chime in.
Yeah, one thing I did want to add to Miguel's summary, one of the things that we had talked about is, for instance, the California Water Plan. Let's not just throw that out the door and let's forget about all the strategies that are identified there. Why don't with the next administration build a very detailed implementation plan in regard to that strategy, building upon what's been done so far and where we should be going to next. And also having a more detailed statewide plan like that will help get something like Prop 4 funds out a lot faster. And so those are some of the ideas that we had talked about.
Great. Thank you, group two. How about group three? Who's the presenter?
That would be me. We had a really interesting question, kind of analyzing the term watersheds and how that really was a negative. I mean, watersheds, like shedding of water, focuses on water transfer and drainage, and then, water leaving systems. And a few people were proponents of replacing watersheds with the term catchments, which definitely implying, more storage of water, particularly uh, um, soil moisture that would have more water availability for ecosystems and also base flows. And we decided that the next governor's office should commit to a philosophical shift to think about water not as a delivery and drainage system driven by sales and consumption, but to an system that is focused on conservation and capturing water for a more efficient cylindrical system. So really, we were thinking about how to transfer from thinking about water as, supply and delivery to a, increasing storage and decreasing use.
All right, great. Thank you, group three. And last but definitely not least, group four.
Great. So we also had a small but mighty discussion in group four. We came up with 3 commitments. The first was that the next administration should prioritize transparent water quality governance and tools, including shared data that can protect our water quality and defend against federal rollbacks. The second was that the administration should emphasize proactive resource management, including stewardship of fundamental below-ground ecosystem services, so that we can focus on healthy soil practices that slow and build water across landscapes for resilience. And then the third was that the next administration prioritizes balanced water allocation so that we're living within our limits and all life is protected. And there were many tensions that emerged in our conversation, and one that was common across many of these suggestions was, how do we ensure that the public are included in governance, especially within impacted communities, while also not overwhelming them with data or expecting any unsupported time or energy commitments from stakeholders, especially marginalized groups? And we'll leave it there. And Tracy, if you have anything else to add, jump in.
We could probably talk about on 10 minutes on each one of those, but yeah, no, you've covered it. Thank you.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Thank you all for your time and for contributing your thoughts. We will be, like I said, sharing these notes as they are, and then we will also be digesting them and putting together a document that we will share back with everyone. And there will be, like I said, continuing conversations over the course of the summer into the fall that we hope to see you at again, and we hope to see you at more of our workshops. And thank you again to Ken and to Dory for kicking us off with such a great conversation. And we hope to see you two again too. We want to continue the threads in this conversation. This has been really interesting. I think data is obviously a common theme and interest. I love that soil health came up. That's one of my poster children. So lots of good stuff that we'll try to pull together and get back out to you all that will be funneled into the next round of conversation. So I hope everyone has a great afternoon. And again, we hope to see you again.